Welcome back on Mad About Markets. We're discussing the large opportunities in India's defense sector and the mega thrust on indigenization. So this is the part of the show where we talk about both the yays and the mays. Let's talk about the yays, which are the tailwinds for the sector. For one, it is a big market like we've been talking about and a large buyer in the form of the government of India. And why just that? All the other governments around the world as well. In India, we are seeing easing policies for supply, and that's adding a key momentum driver for the segment. The other one are high entry barriers and for newer players, so that keeps the existing players in a relatively comfortable spot. The opportunity for exports is huge, and so are the targets. And then there have been a lot of capex plans made and capex committed by existing players. So those are a bunch of tailwinds that we have for the defense sector over and above what we've been talking about so far.
Well, I take your point, Mangalam. There is a lot going on for the sector, but it is time now to flip the coin and look at the other side as well, because you have a long onboarding cycle that is definitely a negative for the sector. Capacity constraints, and especially when you compare it to the kind of demand we have, is also a negative. Incomplete tech transfers from foreign partners, and that is why the reliance on them is also something that is not working for the industry. A long working capital cycle, something that I guess also spoke about today, and the high risk of quality control issues. All of this pose some serious challenges for the growth of the defense sector.
I'll take your point, Ritu. Quality, that's always a concern. So let's pose that question to Amit. Amit, are Indian products as good as international players? Should we worry about quality?
I don't think so, because quality is completely relative according to me. Every manufacturer wants to give the best quality. If you give him one-off piece to manufacture, even the biggest and the best manufacturers which you know today will have some flaws. But if you give him 1,000 numbers to manufacture, he will develop and manufacture it in the world's best quality. You take it any manufacturer from any country. So the very fact that now today the Indian market offers you the same product, multiple quantity and larger business vision, so the quality will become world-class in the next few days to come. Right now, we were always in a development mode. The Indian industry was always in a development mode. So hence, the quality was still adaptable and still quite good, but it will become world-class as the same product is being manufactured in larger quantities.
Well, the industry does seem very optimistic, very bullish about this sector. But, Mr. Patil, what are some of the key risks to this optimistic picture that we've been painting?
Few risk matters essentially for any player, not just a matter of the system integrators like Larsen & Toubro, but essentially government has been a single customer, and to that extent, today one can say very clearly that there's an export markets which are opened up. Before 2015, that was just not possible. So there's some amount of hedge in terms of what one would want to do for government of India as well as for export. The second major risk factor today for the private sector is primarily a set of, I would say, partially a non-level playing field in terms of there's a segment which the government owns and there's a segment which obviously is the private sector. The current government has done a lot to bring the private sector on par, but it is still short of being on par. And to that extent, obviously it's a risk factor when you put in a big amount of capex, that whether you will truly be able to sort of sweat it properly or not really, finding some amount of idling in that. And that's essentially where the export truly helps. The third major risk factor today on the segment we're really talking about is, to some extent, the changes in the capital allocation from the government, and that's exactly where I'm relating to what government would buy. There are some changes here and there. There are decision-making delays. What possibly can happen in a year does take 2.5 years, and that's essentially where it's a risk factor, because the depreciation, interest, and servicing cost has to be borne by someone who has invested.
Take your point, Mr. Patil, for putting all the risks on the table here as well. But let's go back to Commodore Hari. You said that your entire order book would be exhausted by FY27, but in the near future, what are the major orders on the anvil for you?
We have recently won a RFP, that is a bid for next generation ocean-going petrol vessels. And from that alone, we expect the contract to be concluded during the current financial year itself. And we expect around 3,200 to 3,500 crores. This for 4 ships. Now, the next generation corvettes, as I had mentioned, this was approved by the DAC sometime in June. I expect the RFP to be out during the next financial year. And this is a high value order, 36,000 crores. And here we stand a very good chance because one, our resident expertise having built and delivered 9 corvettes, both missile and anti-submarine warfare corvettes to the Indian Navy. So that kind of expertise is resident with us. Plus, of course, the capability in terms of infrastructure and resources. So our bidding strategy will be appropriate to win this order. The second aspect is that this 36,000 is going to be split between 2 shipyards. So the probability factor increases, with the contenders being the other 3 defense public sector shipyards plus a private player, Larsen & Toubro, and Cochin shipyard. So the probability factor is very high. This is one. The second order on the anvil is the next generation fast petrol vessels for the Indian Coast Guard. This we expect the RFP to come out soon. This is for 18 vessels.
All right, let's also address some of the other concerns and primarily about receiving payments from the government on time. Amit, how is that? I mean, are there concerns on that front? Is the working capital cycle itself taking too long?
The working cycles, the long working cycles are the nature of the business. And that has got nothing to do with our customers. I have no complaints when it comes to payment cycles from our customers. See, you have to look at a system which is being used for mission critical applications. It goes through a lot of testing, trials and testing. Now, once my product is tried, tested and invoiced to my customer, my payment comes in time. And Ministry of Defense is possibly one of the best ministries you can work on. So I have no complaints from the government. The long gestation cycles are a part of the industry. And I think by doing more and more products, by more larger quantity supplies, this also will come under control.
All right, and that brings us to our bigger question, and that is, are India's defense manufacturers battle ready to make in India? Mr. Patil, your take.
We are absolute firm believers that within the land and the naval sector, the country truly doesn't need to import anything. It's the air segment wherein to some extent, some of the allocations on the platforms is where there's only a public sector undertaking which produces the air platform. Tata have just about entered there, but there's a lot to happen in the air segment. The other parts, we are absolutely clear can always be done within the country, and that's essentially where it links to what the government has issued in the form of those 3 negative lists, or we call them today the positive indigenization list. So 310 major equipment platforms cannot be imported into this country, and that's a huge opportunity and a great way to look forward to in terms of what will come.
All right, thanks a lot, Mr. Patil, Mr. Mahajan, as well as Commodore Hari for taking the time out explaining to us the opportunities and risks associated with India's defense sector. On that note, what we'll do is wrap up on this edition of Mad About Markets. Thank you for watching.
And we'll see you same time next week.